Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Maurice Philip Ross. Ross was shot and killed on Wednesday, January 23, 2019, in the 200 block of East Anaheim Street in Long Beach, according to LA County coroner records. Isaiah Tucker, Philip Bullard Jr., and Rodney Willis were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. In January 2019, Ms. Brown asked her boyfriend, victim Maurice Ross, to meet her at a Long Beach bar known to be a hangout for the insane Crip gang. Ms. Brown had been invited to the bar by her friend, Ms. Johnson, who was bartending there. Before the victim arrived, Ms. Brown asked Ms. Johnson if there were any gangbangers in the bar, telling her the victim was a member of the Bloods, a rival to the insane Crips. Ms. Johnson assured her there were not. Ms. Brown left the bar briefly to meet the victim at a nearby train station. Defendant Rodney Willis, an associate of the insane Crips, was at the bar speaking with Ms. Johnson when Ms. Brown returned with the victim. Ms. Brown and the victim sat down at the bar. Defendant Willis sat at the table behind them. Shortly thereafter, Defendant Tucker and Bullard arrived at the bar in Tucker's SUV. Defendant Willis stepped outside to meet them. Defendant Willis spoke to Defendant Tucker and Bullard for a few minutes before all three men entered the bar together. Inside the bar, the victim used Ms. Brown's cell phone to record himself making gang signs, indicating his membership in the Bloods. Ms. Brown told him to stop. The victim left the table to use the restroom. When the victim returned, he saw Defendant Bullard speaking with Ms. Brown and confronting him about flirting with his girlfriend. Defendant Bullard apologized. The victim and Ms. Brown went outside to smoke. Defendants Tucker, Bullard, and Willis and several other individuals followed them. Outside the bar, Defendant Bullard and the victim shook hands, seemingly diffusing any animosity between them. Defendant Willis, however, remained very angry that the victim was in insane Crip territory and began gangbanging on the victim. The victim said to someone else in the group, "What's up with you weird-ass Long Beach fools?" Defendant Willis took that comment as a sign of disrespect. Defendant Willis identified himself as Eastside Insane, and he or Defendant Tucker told the victim he was in the wrong city. The victim responded he fucks with the Eastside. The confrontation escalated. Defendants Bullard and Willis backed the victim up against the building. Defendant Willis swung at the victim with a closed fist as if to punch him in the face, but he missed and fell to the ground. The victim ran away. Ms. Brown followed the victim at a slower pace. Defendant Willis ran back to the bar to go inside, but when Ms. Johnson stopped him from entering, he immediately ran after the victim while Defendant Bullard walked slowly behind them. Defendant Tucker too followed. Defendants Tucker and Willis suddenly changed directions and ran back toward the bar and Tucker's SUV. As Tucker ran past Ms. Brown, she heard him shout, "I'm gonna go get the blower," which Ms. Brown interpreted to mean the gun. Ms. Brown yelled at the victim to run. Defendant Tucker got into the driver's seat of his SUV. Defendant Bullard entered the SUV on the front passenger side, and Defendant Willis, who had retrieved his backpack from the bar, joined them in the vehicle. The group drove toward the train station. When they saw the victim on the train platform, Defendant Tucker stopped the SUV, and all three men ran out. Defendants Willis and Tucker chased the victim, and Bullard got into the driver's seat. Defendant Willis caught up to the victim, and the victim hit him in the face, causing Defendant Willis to fall to the ground and chip his tooth. The victim fled. When the victim ran behind the SUV, Defendant Bullard drove the car in reverse as if trying to strike the victim. The victim managed to escape being hit, but seconds later, two residents, a husband and a wife of a nearby apartment building, saw the driver of the SUV extend his arm out of the window with what appeared to be a gun and heard several gunshots. The victim was shot in the back and killed. Ms. Brown saw the SUV speed away from the scene. Defendant Tucker hit the SUV with friends and relatives. After the shooting, Defendant Willis ran back to the bar. He was later picked up at the bar in a car belonging to Defendant Bullard. Most of the confrontation inside and outside the bar and the ensuing chase was captured on surveillance cameras. The footage was played for the jury. The shooting itself was not recorded by surveillance cameras. Defendant Bullard and Tucker were arrested a few weeks after the shooting. Defendant Willis remained at large for several months until he turned himself in. During his custodial interview, Willis said he had heard Ms. Brown and Ms. Johnson talking and had known the victim was a member of the Bloods before he even arrived at the bar. When the victim disrespected the insane Crips, Defendant Willis chased the victim intending to beat him up, not shoot him. Willis said he had been drinking all day and was very drunk. Long Beach police officer Fernando Archuleta testified as an expert on the insane Crips. Archuleta stated the bar was located in Crips territory and frequented by insane Crips. Based on defendant Tucker's tattoos and defendant Willis' statements, Archuleta opined that defendant Tucker was an insane Crip member and defendant Willis was an associate. Officer Archuleta was not personally aware whether defendant Bullard belonged to any gang. Asked by the prosecutor about defendant Bullard's tattoo of the number 211, Archuleta briefly stated he was familiar with the number because that's the penal code for robbery, and there's a Crip gang located in the city of Linwood called the 211 Crips. Following the trial, the jury convicted defendants Isaiah James Tucker and Philip Bullard Jr. of first-degree premeditated murder and found true the gun and gang enhancements. The court struck the enhancements and sentenced both Tucker and Bullard to state prison terms of 50 years to life. At the time the jury returned its verdicts for defendant Tucker and Bullard, it had not reached a verdict on the charges against defendant Willis. The record does not reflect the outcome of defendant Willis' trial. Maurice Philip Ross was 24 years old at the time of death.